Skepticism. That's what I'm here to talk about today. Why? Why not? In 2007, actress Jenny McCarthy announced to the world that her son, after having received an MMR vaccine, that's a measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine, had become autistic. She told the world that she had based this judgment on her observation, and she cited a study that was printed in The Lancet, which is the English Journal of Medicine. It was proposed by this gentleman, Andrew Wakefield. He did a study, and he found a connection between vaccines and the incidence of autism in children. This was published in 1998. So Jenny McCarthy told the world, my son received the vaccine, and he became autistic. So, here's the thing. Everything about the story was wrong. Everything about the story was wrong, and this is the start of pretty much the modern anti-vaccination movement. The Lancet subsequently retracted the story because it turns out that not only had some of the data been fudged, but there were some ethical concerns about the gathering of the data, and also the fact that the study was being paid for by a bunch of attorneys who were going to sue the manufacturers of the MMR vaccine, so Andrew Wakefield was going to make a significant amount of cash. This is a big no-no when you're doing a scientific study. So the Lancet retracted the study and said, turns out it's not real. Andrew Wakefield, notice I'm not calling him Dr. Wakefield because his doctorship, doctorhood, doctor thing got pulled away by the British Medical Association. They said you can't practice medicine anymore because of these ethical questions and concerns. Now, probably the most interestingly, however, is the fact that Jenny McCarthy's son, by all accounts, turns out did not have autism. He wasn't autistic. He had something called Landau-Kleffner syndrome, which in its early stages is very similar to autism in terms of how it appears. Her son now, it's 8 years later, 9 years later, and he's doing fine. He's doing fine. Like I said, this is pretty much the start of the modern anti-vaccination movement. And so you might again say, so? Well, parents in the United States and in England, in Europe, as well as Australia, started getting worried because there was this connection that they thought existed between vaccinating their kids and incidences of autism. So since that time, there's been close to 150,000 cases of preventable illness. There's been over 9,000 deaths. I can't even say the word, it's so troubling. Deaths because of things like measles, whooping cough, varicella, pertussis, mumps, and rubella. Things that we thought we were done with decades ago because these vaccines had existed. Subsequently, there have been study after study after study done, and there is no connection, zero connection between vaccines and autism. Zero. What could have prevented this? What could have helped the situation? Maybe not fixed it totally, but what could have ameliorated the situation somewhat so that all of these parents, who quite rightly were concerned, wouldn't have overreacted and stopped immunizing their children? Here's what could have helped. Skepticism. And that's what I'm here to talk about today, skepticism, being a skeptic. What does that mean? It's very simple. At its core, skepticism is evidence-based thinking, waiting to see what the evidence says about any question, anything that might be proposed to you, taking a second and seeing what the evidence says, not what you feel, not what you hope to be true, not what you've heard from a friend, but what the evidence shows. Being a skeptic comes down to this. You are presented with a piece of information, and in essence you go, what? Can we all try that together? Ready? I'm going to present you with a piece of information, and you're all going to go, what? So here we go. Piece of information. Oh, you're such good skeptics. That's what it comes down to. Evidence-based thinking and embracing your doubt. Taking a second and saying, wait, explain. Wait, what's the proof of this? How does this work? There's this great Latin saying, ubi dubium, ibi libertas. It's a great Latin saying. In essence, it means, with doubt, there is freedom. If you're ever going to memorize one Latin phrase, this is the Latin phrase to memorize. So it's ubi dubium, ibi libertas. Now, not only is it cool because it's a great thing, because it's with your doubt, you are allowed to experience the truth of how things actually are. But it has this wonderful Frank Sinatrian symmetry to it. Ubi dubium, ibi libertas, baby. It's just the best quote ever. Faith tends to get put up on a pedestal in our society, understandably so. But I'm here to say that doubt should maybe be as high, if not even higher, upon that pedestal, because doubt is the thing that leads us to progress. Doubt allows you to go, why aren't women allowed to vote? You know, real radical ideas like that. That's doubt-driven. Doubt drives the engine of science. Doubt drives the engine of critical thinking and wondering, hey, maybe there's something better than horse travel, or maybe there's something better than not having airplanes. You know, small ideas. I love my doubt. I embrace my doubt. My doubt is what defines me and drives me. And I can proudly say that I have no faith in anything, really. I have trust in things. That's a big difference. I trust that the sun will come up tomorrow because it's come up every day of my life. I trust that my friends would help me if I needed help because they've helped me before and I've helped them. So I have trust in a lot of things, but I have faith in very little because at its essence, faith is belief in something without evidence. And I don't have anything like that in my life. Now remember that skepticism is not a belief system. It's not a faith system. It's a tool. And in the same way that a carpenter isn't a hammerist, but one who uses a hammer, that's what a skeptic is. A skeptic is one who uses skepticism to approach problems and questions and concerns. Now, what isn't skepticism? A skeptic is not a cynic. And this gets equated. There's even definitions that equate the two. It's like 2 out of 7 definitions that I found had cynic being in the definition of skeptic. And this might have been true at one point, but not anymore. Not from today on. Cynics look for the negative. Cynics pre-game the situation and look for the negative. They know that they're going to get screwed, and they use whatever they can to confirm the fact that it's going to be bad news. They're negative, and they just don't care. Skeptics desperately care. Skeptics want to know what's going on. Skeptics might be prepared for the worst, but they're not expecting the worst. Skeptics will gladly accept good news if the evidence points towards it. That's the main difference between a skeptic and a cynic. So please don't be cynical when you're questioning things. Skeptics are also not denialists. Now, a denialist is someone who, if with mountains of evidence, will still hold on to their contrary idea because maybe it makes them feel good, makes them feel special, unique. You can look at the mountains of evidence saying that there's climate change is caused by man or is at least happening. And if you don't believe in that, if you say that there is no climate change, you are a denialist. You are not a skeptic of climate change. You are a climate change denialist. If you look at all the evidence, I even have to say this is crazy, but there are Holocaust deniers. Those aren't skeptics. They're not Holocaust skeptics. They are Holocaust deniers, looking at the information and saying, nope, I don't care. I don't care. I'm going to keep denying that, and I'm going to claim that I'm a skeptic. Again, it's that simple. It's as simple as evidence-based thinking. Modern skepticism looks like this chart here, where you've got the combination, the commingling of science education and consumer protection. Because that's what it comes down to. How does the world work? How does the universe work? And what should I spend my money on? And right there in the middle is skepticism. It felt good to be the fast reader, right? It felt good, right? Here's my skeptical awakening. How did I get into this whole thing? When I was, I think, in 2nd grade or 1st grade, I was at school, and someone told me that the sun, that big yellow ball in the sky, is actually closer to the earth during the winter than it is during the summer. I refused to believe this. This made no sense to me. How could it be colder when the sun is closer? And I went home to my dad and I said, I heard this at school. This seems weird. This seems weird to me. There's no way that the sun is closer during the winter. And my dad said, actually, that's right. Let me explain why. Let me explain what's going on. It's not much closer, but it is closer. He proceeded to grab a globe, which you see there, and he grabbed a flashlight. And he turned the lights off. Now you have to remember, in 1978, when your dad grabs a globe and a flashlight and turns the lights off, this is our internet. He proceeded to tell me that it wasn't about the distance of the sun, it was about the angle of the sun. and that during the summer, the angle is more direct. So it's heating us because there's a tilt to the Earth. When it's on the equator, it's more direct. That's why the equator is always warm, because it's getting more direct sunlight. And the fact that there's a tilt means that there's seasons, and that axial tilt is the reason for the season, by the way. And that in the southern hemisphere, our seasons are reversed. This was mind-blowing, because this actually made sense. There was an answer. I had a skeptical question, and there was an answer. Now you have to remember, that's a perfect example of showing how kids, in their essence, in many ways, are skeptics. If you've ever been to a magic show being done for children, you will know that children are skeptics. If you've ever performed a magic show for children, there is a special throne reserved for you in the halls of Valhalla. Now, kids question things all the time. They're credulous in other ways, but in a lot of ways they're very skeptical. Science has shown, and any parents that are here will be able to back this up, that when posed with some kind of a fact or some kind of a statement, a child's brain pretty much works like this. That's science, people. One of the best answers you can give to a child that asks you a question is, I don't know. Let's figure it out. And maybe 35 years later, they'll be on stage telling the story. Right, Dad? My dad's over there right in the audience, right? Okay, so why is this important? Why is being skeptical important? Well, here's the thing. We're inundated with information. We are inundated with information today. The 24/7 news cycle, blogs, email, the web. It's crazy. It's said that Americans hear a false fact every 7 seconds. Now, I just made that up. But there you go. You're inundated with information all the time. You're inundated every time you go on the web, every time you get a forwarded email, every time you look at your Twitter stream, every time you look at a celebrity talking about their latest book or how great their movie is. You're inundated with information. Now here's the thing. You already know how to deal with this information. You already know how to be skeptical about it. And here's an easy way to remember it. 4-1. 4-1, what does that mean? When the web first started getting real traction 10, 12, 15 years ago, websites, popular websites, on April 1st would put up fake stories. They put up fake stories. So you'd go to HollywoodInsider.com and there would be a story saying the next Die Hard movie is going to be in black and white and in French. Or you'd go to Politico.com and there would be some ridiculous story saying Donald Trump wants to build a wall between Mexico and the US, you know? Something ridiculous, you know? And initially, when this was first happening in the early days of the web, people would grab these stories and they would forward them and they would share them. And then slowly over time, people started realizing, oh, wait a minute, it's April Fool's Day. And it became harder and harder for websites to fool people. And it had to get more and more elaborate and more interesting. And a lot of websites stopped doing it because now it's so expected. Here's my advice to you. Every time you look on the web, every time you receive a piece of email, pretend it's April 1st. Take a second. It can act as a wonderful buffer. Take a second and think, what? It's very simple. Pretend it's April 1st. Now, here's the danger of my skepticism and the fact that I am so embraced in my doubt. I was forwarded this story about hipsters getting beard transplants. Hipsters in Brooklyn were getting beard transplants to make their beards fuller. I was sent this story and I said, no. This is not true. It wasn't April 1st, but it didn't matter. I wasn't believing it. No, there's just no way. This is too good of a story. It makes you feel too superior to hipsters looking for beard transplants. There's no way that this story could be real. And I saw a second story about it, and a third story, and a fourth story, and I was in danger of becoming a hipster beard transplant denialist. Well, it's totally true. Hipsters are getting beard transplants. And I had to get to the point where I said, okay, The evidence pretty much says that hipsters are getting beard transplants. Everyone is susceptible. I was set in my thinking. Everyone is susceptible. Everyone is susceptible to not thinking critically. The most famous example of someone who you would think would be a critical thinker and would not be susceptible to thinking poorly is Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Now, Arthur Conan Doyle, of course, created the character of Sherlock Holmes, the most critically minded, evidence-based character in all of Western literature. Pretty much, you could argue very easily. Well, Arthur Conan Doyle believed in fairies. And not sort of like storytelling kind of fairies. He believed when these girls, or their representatives, brought him these photos of these fairies. These are the Cottingdale fairies. If you ever want to Google an interesting story, Google the Cottingdale fairies. These were a bunch of girls that made paper cutouts, put them in their garden, and took pictures. And in Edwardian England, this became a massive, huge fad. And people were convinced that these fairies were real, that these girls had actually photographed fairies. And amongst one of their most avid proponents was Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. No one is not susceptible to not having your biases influence how you think. When do you need to be skeptical? Do we need to be skeptical all the time? Well, a lot of the time. You need to be skeptical when someone's asking for your money. You need to be skeptical when someone's asking for your vote. You need to be skeptical when someone's asking for your trust. You need to be skeptical when someone's asking for your money. You need to be skeptical when someone's asking or giving you advice. You need to be skeptical when someone's asking for your money. You need to be skeptical when someone's asking or giving you their help. And you need to be skeptical when someone's asking for your money. But here's when it's most important to be skeptical. And here's when it's the most difficult. When you want something to be true. It's the most difficult time that you need to step back and question. It's the hardest thing to do. It's the hardest thing to do. When the Star Wars prequels came out, I convinced myself that they were good movies. They were not. It's the hardest thing to do. It's what Jenny McCarthy was doing, or failing to do. She's not stupid, she's not evil, she's not ignorant. She's misinformed, and she's a mother who wants the best thing for her son. You have to remember that. She's not trying to be dumb. She's not trying to be evil. She was drastically misinformed. And she wanted there to be a reason why her son all of a sudden seemed to have autism. Because if maybe there was a reason, maybe then there was a cure, or some kind of answer, or someone that could be blamed. It's an understandable response. But that's in each one of us that exists. Now here, some of you might think, okay, well, when you're being this hypercritical and this hyper-skeptical, how do you maintain awe and wonder? How do you do, what are the magical things in your life? Let me tell you, the universe is interesting enough with the stuff that's real, that it'll keep you fascinated and full of awe and wonder forever. The more you know about how something works, the more interesting it gets. You ever try to sew a button onto a shirt? It's like impossible. If you've never sewn a button onto a shirt, try to sew a button onto a shirt and have it not look like a lion has done it. I mean, it's so difficult. You try to do it, and all of a sudden you realize, wow, people that can sew buttons on shirts are really talented. And if someone were to show you how you sew a button onto a shirt, you would go, oh, that's how you do it. I love that. That's fantastic. You don't lose your awe and wonder of button sewing because you know how the process works, or you question the process, or think, is there a better way to sew a button onto a shirt? Believe me, the universe is interesting enough as it is. There's enough questions, there's enough open-ended questions that we don't have to make up stuff to make it interesting. You will always maintain your awe and wonder, and the more you know about something, the more interesting it becomes. Well, what about having an open mind? Yes, it is drastically important to have an open mind because sometimes there are paradigm shifts. Sometimes things come along that change the way everything was thought. It doesn't happen that often, but it does occur. However, if someone says to you, hey, I can cure cancer by administering Dr. Pepper enemas, saying, no, you can't, does not mean you don't have an open mind. It just means you kind of understand how things work. There's this great quote, let's keep an open mind, but not so open that our brains fall out. Now that's from Judge Harry Stone on the show, on NBC's show Night Court. I don't know if you remember the show Night Court, right? He said that on one of those episodes. But it turns out, he didn't actually say that first. Carl Sagan said it first. And the more I investigated this, it actually turns out Carl Sagan didn't say it first, but Walter Koenig back in 1939 said this first. I love the fact that while preparing this talk, I had a little skeptical adventure in the middle of it. I had never heard of Walter Koenig, but he's the guy that said it first. That's a great quote to remember as well. It's important to have your mind open, but not so open that your brain falls out. So what's there to do? What do we do? How do we approach this? How do we approach our lives? Here's the deal. Remember that skepticism is a tool. Remember to question things. It's okay to question things. Remember that skepticism is not cynicism. You don't want to become cynical. You don't want to become cynical. Be prepared for the worst. I have a pragmatic optimism. That's how I approach my life. I'm pretty optimistic, but I understand sometimes things just don't work out. Don't become cynical. Treat every day when you're dealing with information as if it was April Fool's Day. It's a very simple way to do it. It'll give you one little second, a little buffer to be able to question things. Everyone is susceptible. Remember that everyone is susceptible. Check before you forward an email. Check before you forward something, before you retweet something, before you blog about something. Take a second. Sometimes it's literally seconds of effort to check and see if some bit of information is true, if a meme is true or correct. Learn which resources you can trust. I'm going to quickly, I'll talk about this outside for some more if you want to have a chat, but the website Snopes.com is a free website. This answers almost every question you can have dealing with urban legends, dealing with those emails that you get forwarded about, the person that if we can collect these bottle caps, we'll get a heart-lung machine for them. Go to Snopes.com. It'll take seconds to realize that, no, that's an old piece of email which has been circulating since 1999, and it's not true. You can go to sciencebasedmedicine.org if you have questions about therapies and treatments. Which work, which don't? Where should your money be spent? Where shouldn't your money be spent? What is the evidence backing that up? You can go to quackwatch.com, same deal. A huge, huge website with just information on all kinds of medical and therapeutic questions. There's two podcasts. There's A Skeptic's Guide to the Universe and there's Skepticality. These are two podcasts that have been casting pods since, for 10 years. For 10 years, there's over 1,000 hours of free, 100% free content from these two shows alone that can answer almost every question you might have about whether or not something is real. There's what'stheharm.net is another great one that shows, people say, yeah, what's the harm in having those beliefs? Well, what's the harm will show you what the harm might be. And then there's Wikipedia. Something as simple as Wikipedia. Yes, there is some information on Wikipedia which is not correct, but the vast majority of information on Wikipedia is correct. And this can literally be a 20-second search sometimes just to check and see what the deal is. But here's the thing. Most important, don't take my word for it. Thank you so very much.